I think we are live on, let me just, okay. So, hello everyone. I believe that we are live on everything.
Yep, I think so.
So we should be live on everything. Great to see you all. We are starting the live today. I think we have three of us, Nishan and Manas. Manas wants to start talk about this series of live that we have just started, and then we will go after that.
Thanks, Mohammad. Yes, so Monetization Monthly is a monthly webinar happening every Monday, third Monday of the month. And we started this because, like a couple of us e-commerce professionals got together and we were discussing about e-commerce growth and e-commerce monetization, how marketplaces can grow their revenue besides basically selling goods and services over on their marketplace. So we thought, hey, why not create a monthly webinar and share our tips and strategies to other e-commerce professionals, other marketplace professionals, and also bring in guests. So yeah, that's how this is our pilot, and we brought two very experts from the industry, Nishan, Subedi, and Mohammad. Both of them are e-commerce professionals at Overstock, and they have been working extensively in the marketplace domain. So yeah, I'll let you guys introduce yourself and we can get started.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Manas, for the introduction. And I think we are live on everything like YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I think both LinkedIn and Twitter, both on my end and Manas's end. So we are live in several places. However, if you have any questions, I think the Instagram one would be Instagram. You can ask questions, or you can ask at LinkedIn or YouTube. This we will check, and we will answer any question that you have, hopefully at the end. Yes, good. So let's talk a little bit about myself, and then Nishan talks about himself. So like this is Mohammad Hajiaghayi. So I have been with this business of like e-commerce that we talk, like starting with Microsoft and Google, and then like for like 3 years almost at Amazon, and then at Overstock. These are more the retail business like Amazon and Overstock. And that's the thing that we have more focus on this type of retail business, because we believe that there is a lot of essentially potentials for growth. And what has been done, what can be done, and what should be done. That's the thing that we are talking more. And as you know, I'm a professor at the University of Maryland, but I think today we are talking more about the industry type of things and the e-commerce. And so, yeah, Nishan, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Dr. Mohammad and Manas. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Nishan Subedi, Vice President of Algorithms at Overstock. Before this of being at like Etsy and Wayfair, I've pretty much spent my entire kind of working career in e-commerce and marketplaces. So this is like a really fun topic, and there's like a ton in here to go into. So even kind of business model wise, like Wayfair kind of was one of the early kind of e-commerce companies trying to sell like furnitures, and Etsy kind of started off as a marketplace, still continues to be a marketplace, and this is something I think we're going to go into in the conversation, but just the nuances are changing, right? There's all sorts of new and different kinds of like e-commerce companies as well as marketplaces coming up. Overstock has been kind of a pioneer in this space since the internet kind of boom in the early 2000s. So lots of kind of fun history there to dive into as well. Yeah, kind of leave it at that. I'm super excited about this conversation. I'm excited about the series in general. Love the idea of kind of going into deep dives for many different aspects of e-commerce.
Sometimes you will see that I will look at my cell phone. I'm checking the messages, making sure everything is fine. This is live, so we want to make sure that everything is going fine. Great. So, okay. So, given that, introduction, let's start about. First we need to start. This is a potential. Of course, potential is clear. Now we have two words: e-commerce and retail. We need to understand these ones in a bit better way. So to do so, let's start with e-commerce. So what is e-commerce? So I will say I think if you go and search Wikipedia, I say that e-commerce is any commerce that happens on the internet. That's of course one definition. We can go a bit more into details and talk about the examples that exist. But also on top of that, that's actually interesting. We had also in computer science, there was a conference called ACM-EC. First, it was it started something like around 20 years ago about e-commerce, essentially ACM conference on e-commerce. Later on, this was there until very recently, and actually these are lots of papers in this area was published there. Lots of game theory was the important part of e-commerce, and I think it is still there. And online algorithms and this type of things and of course there are some new technology. They changed it more recently to economics of computation. It's a bit more general, but that's one way of essentially seeing the world. But now, given this, I think, Nishan, what do you think about the e-commerce?
So it kind of really started with I think e-commerce has always been very closely tied to the rise of the internet, right? Early on, marketplaces and just ways marketplaces, if you think about it, going back to its roots, there's things called bazaars, in Southeast Asia and Turkey and the Middle East had these big concepts. So ultimately, it's a place where people can come to exchange goods. And later, I think now we're seeing a huge evolution of exchange of services. So any kind of commerce, any kind of these exchanges that happen over the internet, and it's been very tightly coupled with the kind of rise and adoption of the internet. That to me is e-commerce. And then we've seen multiple different kinds of models around this. So it could be a business doing an exchange with another business. It could be a business selling stuff to customers. Amazon, Overstock, Wayfair, great examples of that. It could be customers selling stuff to customers as well. So a lot of Etsy sellers start out that way. They start out with some kind of hobby. They want to, sell something. They're also buying a bunch of things. Craigslist is another good example of customer to customer, and then customers to businesses as well, right? So e-commerce can serve as a central point for you as a customer, maybe, your secondhand items or things you don't want anymore, selling that to a business, or Amazon Books or any of these kinds of whoever takes these used items. So yeah, I think it permeates across kind of any aspect of doing an exchange, doing commerce on the internet. And then retail, mentioned retail as well. Retail is quite interesting too, right? So retail to me is when you sell to the final customer, if the customer usually is the consumer, that is retail. And historically, even now, a lot of kind of sales happen via exchange of goods through multiple parties. So there might be somebody manufacturing something that might go through some kind of supplying shipping company, and maybe they buy that inventory and then they sell it to smaller retail stores in bulk. So there used to be wholesale retailers and then kind of wholesalers and the retailers. And so there's an interesting distinction there as well. Retail is generally regarded as when it faces the end customer. And one like really interesting aspect of this is like the mail order stuff, right? Like way back, before like the internet and stuff existed, like you could order via like sending a mail, and then at some point you got like the package kind of delivered to you via mail. So I think these things kind of really come together to make e-commerce like all pervasive currently. I think you're muted.
Yes, sir. Yeah, great. So let's actually talk a little bit about few of these points. So I think this we discussed like this idea that in some sense e-commerce, I mean, you can define from business to business, consumer to business, business to consumer, and consumer to customer. So, and I think we are using consumer and customer at the same meaning in these things. I think that's it's very similar words, and I mean, we are using them exchangeably. Now, so these are the typical thing. I think this like maybe if you consider as a graph, it would be some like maybe bipartite graph that like business to business or consumer or customer to business. But there are, I will say that this is not just a bipartite graph. It can be actually more than that. It might be the case that like, it is not just like it might be a business talking to a customer talks to another business, and another business may talk with another business, and so on and so forth. So I think we will talk more about this. One place that will come such a things is like, for example, display ads, that lots of, I mean, entities have been involved here. These are like quite complicated networks actually. Even for me that I'm working on networks, it took me some time to understand how is it going. And these are some of the things that we will talk more in this type of series, because these are actually complicated, very nice set of problems, challenges, I mean, ideas for startups or other things that the people can consider it. And these are quite technical. So we may become technical at some point, but hopefully we try to don't use any slide or anything to make it high level. That's one thing. The other issue is that I want to get your opinion. So how do you think about, for example, like give some example for this one. For example, Netflix. Can we say Netflix is is a retail business? In some sense, built, I mean, here we are talking about the digital goods. Right. And I think digital goods now are like very important part of our life nowadays. And everything becomes like, I mean, books becomes essentially digital books. I don't know, movies from this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, movies and like a lot of these digital assets, right? Like they're like, I think the one property that distinguishes them is like, you can make multiple copies of it and the value does not diminish. So you can have the same thing consumed by multiple people. Standard definition, I think, doesn't necessarily speak to it, but this is absolutely the same, right? It's like they're consuming a service, and I mean, there is a bunch of service accounts for Netflix and Hulu and all of these. It's just, I think the good is not exhausted when you consume it more. But I think in practice, what ends up being really interesting is like a certain set of problems that they don't necessarily need to worry about. So for example, like a lot of times, like, like pricing takes on like a slightly different form when it comes to when you only have one item, one tangible good, or, one like time for somebody's service, like for DoorDash or Uber, right? But in the case of Netflix, that evolves to like the pricing structure. I think you look at it a little differently, because it's not like you're going to run out of things. But what's more important probably is ensuring that the price is at the right level so that people are kind of, like still inclined to pay whatever, people are inclined to pay the highest price as they perceive the value of these things. So that can lead to kind of quite interesting differences in the problems that lay out. Like a lot of times, like e-commerce companies focus on like the pricing strategy ends up being a very core part of an e-commerce business. And, usually the pricing is done on a per product or a per class of product basis, right? And then there's general guidelines in terms of how companies handle pricing in general. So
yeah. So Nishan, actually, let me just stop you. I think something that you did very nice, and I think you mentioned it. I think we can go a little bit deep dive. This is actually the deep dive is a nice thing that I got it actually from. It is one of the values of Amazon. These are some very nice word that they have chosen essentially, and. So that's like, for example, they say customer obsession. At Shopify, they will call it merchandise obsession. So I think these are, we give the credit probably to Amazon for the first building these things, and then lots of other
first
companies.
Obsession was created.
Exactly. Good. So I think we mentioned about these things about the Netflix and about the pricing.
Mm-hmm.
So pricing can be actually quite challenging when we talk about the digital goods. I think the definition of the digital good is that in some sense, I don't know what is the exact definition. I mean, you can give definition from different angles, but one definition is that it can be copied, because these are series of bits in some sense. So I will say, I mean, digital means 0, 1, and you have a 0, 1 is a file or something. It can be easily copied. There are lots of good things for that, because you can scale it very easily. So you can have, I mean, this is the way actually we are doing currently the live. We are scaling our live to several, into several streams, and we are doing that without that much cost. So that's, in some sense, that's a definition of digital goods. However, one thing that makes it quite hard is the pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Because pricing is not trivial. And this is a very substantial issue. For example, if you see Netflix, the last quarter that they will mention it, I think, their stock went quite a bit, like, of course, all the stock went down, but their stock in particular, it was around something like almost 700, and it reached almost 160 or something like this. I don't know what is the...
That's a downturn.
Yeah. So it's a lot. And one of the things that had a big effect on that, because they lost customers.
Mm-hmm.
And why they lost customers, one of the things is that the people, now they just share. I mean, so you can think about the whole, Netflix as that somebody, I mean, some big people, like a big producer, they are producing a movie, and then we will sell it as a retail to lots of customers.
Right.
So in that case, then the issue is that like how much would be the price for each guy? And this is the issue of copying. Of course, one thing is that you can maybe copy the whole movie, because anything that comes to your computer, potentially you can record it and save it and send it to another one. That's one issue about it.
Right.
But even more than that, the thing that happened for Netflix is that the people are using their own, I mean, they have one account, and everyone using that account essentially.
Right.
So that is, in some sense, copying the account, not just the whole things, instead of just one movie. And this is one thing that they have started cracking down on, that to make sure that the people cannot use it. So this is a serious issue. And we are not talking like maybe around 2000, or maybe at that time, e-commerce essentially evolved because of the internet, because it's commerce over the internet. But we are talking to 2022, and this is one of the big issues of Netflix, that how do they want to resolve this issue? So these are very challenging issues, especially pricing of digital goods. The same thing about the podcast and other stuff, essentially. You can see that the people may share accounts, etc. So these are non-trivial problems to solve. And still, after, I don't know, maybe 22, 25 years, still we have these issues.
Right.
So these are very challenging things for when we talk about digital goods. And when we talk about retail, we are talking about both, I mean, digital goods and non-digital goods. But maybe the people more have in their mind like the non-digital good. That might be easier, at least for this particular thing, because you get this item and then you consume it.
There's a few things there I think really interesting. Like one thing, like in terms of like, first, like Netflix and its kind of pricing model, I think incrementally the cost of one more user, one more service account on Netflix is like small, right? Incrementally. So when they kind of go through these pricing decisions, I think what they have to consider is like the overall aggregate, and that includes how many current active customers there are, how many potential customers they can have in the future, what is their churn rate, right? Like what is the rate at which existing customers are dropping out, and all of that ends up factoring into these pricing decisions. And like one reason I think we see so much volatility in kind of Netflix stock based on this kind of news coming out of Netflix is it vastly changes that equation. So if they're going to crack down on service accounts, and there's a lot of people that don't like it, and they're like, they'd rather, not sign up for it, or they're willing to go through kind of the pain of just watching on one device. We don't know, right? We don't know how flexible these things are. We don't know how hooked customers are onto these services, watching them in specific scenarios. So these are all kind of uncharted territory, which causes a lot of uncertainty, I think, for the market. The same kind of thing, like when they talked about ads as well, right? It's like ad monetization is still like very evolving story right now. And like a lot of customer perception, particularly tied to these kinds of services, is that, like I'm paying for this service, why should I see an ad? Which is not the same, when you're browsing websites, like the norm there is like, yeah, I know these are going to be ads, but they're still useful to me, and I still can consume through it. I think that mindset is fundamentally different for these streaming services like Netflix. And so when they say, hey, we're going to put ads, like there's a huge uproar. At least the vocal people speak up quite a bit in terms of that.
Let me just add, I think just add something to Nishan mentioned. So actually, this is the model that Nishan mentioned that actually the Netflix is now considering to put, essentially charge the people less and then show ads. And this is more, I will say, the YouTube. YouTube is the one that it charges you zero, and then just you will see lots of ads. And they increase the ads. I mean, that's the reason that Google's revenue is going up quite a bit, because they can put one ad. It was maybe started with one ad, maybe no ad, then one ad. Now you will see two ads. It's very regular that for videos you will see two ads, one at a time, essentially. Right. So that's one thing. And so these are like, I think, coming back to this concept of retail. So there are retail, we talk about some kinds of like tangible goods versus digital goods. Mm-hmm. One other issue is that also, I mean, when we talk about retail, the issue is that whether all these are end users or it can be other businesses. So this is also, I mean, nowadays, I think the difference between business and customers is not that clear. But I think some definitions say that a retail is because we want, they may call a bit differently when there is some kind of wholesale production and selling it to another business. So they say, for example, 80% of the sales should go to end users. So that's also, I think that's maybe, some reasonable things, but still it means that 20% can go to other businesses and so on. I think so this is also this definition that whether it goes to end users or goes to some other small business. It can be combination, but in some sense, majority should go to like end users. So these are like the two type of things that we discussed. And one idea is that if we want to talk about retail, what type of analysis are important? Do we want to talk a little bit about those type of things? We can go through the details later, but maybe just say something that if you want to have a retail business, what you should do.
I think kind of, tying it back to kind of the previous conversation we had, like one thing, I think the difference you mentioned between, like tangible goods and digital goods, I think one way this in a practical sense that this difference kind of exists is like pricing on a per unit basis versus pricing for a bundled service, right? And we can go into, there's a lot to talk about there. We can go into that later. But if we shift more on the retail side, I think the kinds of, there's a lot of time and effort spent on pricing on a per good basis, because presumably, the customer, if we look at furniture, the customer only needs one dining table. The question is, what dining table is that customer going to buy? Versus, I could watch this movie today, that movie tomorrow. And so even from a consumption basis, like it's different. So the typically what we see in a lot of kind of retail businesses, like the first thing is like market analysis. And, maybe this is something that's general for like almost every like business that exists, but what's the size, what's the stage of the market? And that may lead to really interesting kind of opportunities for like advertisement and kind of marketing dollars as well, right? Competitiveness in the market, really important factor to consider. Like, where do you sit in terms of your brand value and how do you compare to your competitors? I think that becomes really important. And also like knowing the customer as we, get into personalization. I'm sure we can do like a huge series on personalization as well. But really knowing your customer, their spending habits, their preferences, that becomes really important. And then pricing strategies. How does your what is your pricing strategy, and then how does all of the different ways you price things, and presumably a lot of this is automated at this point in time for at least the major companies, right? How does that tie into your strategy, and how does so there's a nice little kind of balance you have to run into that as well. Product mix becomes something really important. Like, what is the customer coming to you for? Are you giving them like a complete whole solution, right? So I mean, the grocery stores and stuff is a good example of this. Like, you may go in to buy a can of milk, but hey, while you're there, maybe you'll buy some eggs, and I needed to get this thing for my bedroom. And so like, how are you viewing kind of the customers like needs? Are it cohesive? Is it like, is the customer coming to you after they're done with work? Those used to be concerns, and there used to be like sales per square footage and that kind of concerns when it came to a physical location. But there's interesting evolution of that from an e-commerce perspective as well. There's no like fixed real estate, but there is fixed attention for the customer, right? And like, how are you engaging the customer appropriately? Those become really important factors to consider. And then I think all of this then goes into the economics of your business. So like, there's a fixed cost, or there's a cost structure you have in terms of the goods. Like, if you're creating the goods, you have the manufacturing costs, but a lot of times you're buying these from somebody else. So there's cost structures, maybe you're sharing revenue with them, or you're buying these assets from them with the assumption that you can sell them for higher. And then all of these kind of need to work for the business economics, right? I think so. What at least I've observed is like, all of these are very tightly coupled with one another and core to how you run your business.
Great. So I think as we discussed, there are lots of analysis that can be done and should be done. We will go through the details of this. So if you want to make a new business, what are the things that you can do it? That is one important thing. But that we will we have a deep dive on this in the future, versions of this series, that we will have it monthly, as Manas mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah.
And again, please, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. These are like YouTube, especially YouTube and LinkedIn would be the best. Others, they may not have the best things for asking questions, but LinkedIn and YouTube especially are very good. You can just do live chat and do that. And great. Now, the issue, of course, if you want to have a retail, we need to earn some money. So where does this money come from? What are the type of places that we can actually earn money for retail?
Yeah.
You want to start, then I will talk more.
Yeah, I think, and on this, like, so broadly, like, one is like, either you've gotten money by selling something, right? Or, you provide a service in regard to the thing you've sold. So like, if you're selling like furniture, like, you get money from like a customer buying the furniture. Or second, maybe, you get money for assembling that furniture, like shipping or delivering. A lot of times we see like people don't prefer to make a lot of money from like the shipping and the like service around it. So they focus on kind of growth and highest revenue. But a big platform, like big like area there, I think is like on-site monetization, we'll call it, right? Which is like advertisement on your platform. So which allows you to then make a viable source of revenue from displaying the right kinds of things, or the things people want you to display on your website or your e-commerce platform. And as we've seen with like Amazon and like Overstock and stuff, these are like huge kind of drivers of revenue for the company. So I kind of pause there. I'd love your take on this. Yeah.
Great. So I think we were talking about, some way of, essentially getting the money. So let me formulate the problem a little.
Yeah.
So one way, of course, we will earn money when we sell an item. It can be a digital good. It can be a tangible good. We will make some money. This money, of course, we may consider in average. Maybe for one particular digital good, we may not pay that much, but we will say, for example, in the example of Netflix, we are paying a huge cost to create a movie or create a series or something like that. So we need to divide it over the number of things that we are creating. So some kind of average cost, which might be different for tangible cost. Maybe for each of them you will pay. Of course, maybe some average cost also there because of you need to produce a company, etc. So in that case, there is some cost for you, some average cost, and then you will sell it. That's a thing that is the difference. In some sense, it's profit, sometimes called juice or anything essentially. Like at Oversight, I think we call it juice. But in some sense, it's the profit. That's game theory things that we have some pricing that we sell and some actual price that we had it to create it. And that's the difference is the one that we will make money. So pricing is one place that we are making. So that's, of course, is one of the main places that we are. The other place is, there's this new things is the advertisement. That the people, so in some sense, you are using the traffic that comes to your website to make money. And that, as you know, that's a very big business. Google is a pioneer of that. Then Facebook came to the business. And it was also, interesting. We can again go through the different business of these things. Like, just in short, Facebook started to get some kind of network effect. It is called. Through that, it tried to get money in a sense that, like, this is a network of people. I will give some free toothpaste to you, and then you like it, and then you will essentially advertise for me. It started with this business, but it turned out actually this business cannot go anywhere because the people don't want to do the advertisement. And I think even for largest news, there was some study at, I think some papers by Microsoft people show that maybe at most 10,000 people actually are forwarding and this one. So at the end, they decided to go to Google business. What is the Google business? That any content that you will show, use the information, try to use as much as possible the information of users and show some advertising. So that's the thing that has happened. And after that, I think, so these two are still the biggest one. Now, third one, which is actually a newcomer, is Amazon. That I think the latest one is something like 32 billion. They got only, the whole, I think that was the year, that was the yearly things. It was the time that I joined, it was something below 10 billion. Now they are announcing it officially. At that time, maybe they didn't announce it. But like in 3 years, essentially, then from less than 10 billion, now 32 billion. And these are the third, sorry, what was that?
Like 3x in 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. In 3 years, essentially, they tripled essentially their money that comes from advertisement. This is why? Because now you have something that you will sell. So these are the regular items that you are selling. In addition of that, then you are selling ads, essentially showing ads, advertise it, and then you will, get money for advertisement from the partners or businesses that they are working with. So that's some kind of additional money. And so in this pricing and advertisement, in some sense, these are like I will say two major things. Of course, each of them are very complicated and you want to go to details of each of them. The concept of discount, like there are some other things, for example, how much you want to give the discount that goes into pricing, or how do you want to change actually day-to-day pricing. Right. Or these are like some kind of emails that you are sending. This is part of actually both advertisement and pricing, because you want to bring the people to your website. There you can sell them more and you can show more advertisement as well. And one other also controversial view that I want to say, even like that is related to the one that you mentioned about advertisement. You see that the people don't like advertisement generally. However, I will say I can give such a definition. It may be a bit bold definition, but I will say the whole e-commerce is advertisement. how come it can be the case? Of course, the advertisement that we don't like, we see it and we don't like it. But consider, for example, the Amazon model or even Uber model. What did they do? In some sense, the marketplaces, they're not doing anything. I mean, okay, I don't want to say anything, but one of the major things that they are doing is actually advertisement of the service or advertisement of the good. Why these people are going and using Amazon? Why? Because, I mean, that's a good place that they can sell their stuff. So what does Amazon do? I mean, other than, I mean, they produce something themselves. But for those things that they don't produce themselves, they get some items from some guy, show it, advertise it.
People know that Amazon is where you can find these kinds of items, right? That's
exactly.
What they're
So in some sense, you will just take the item. These guys, this producer, they are talking with Amazon because it's a good place to sell. So they just advertise their things. They will sell it, and then they will get some profit out of it. So in some sense, even the whole retail business, in some sense, if you view it, it's just some kind of advertisement. Or the same thing, for example, Uber, like or Lyft or others essentially. These are again some of the here, for example, you can say customer to customer. So these are some of these people who are drivers that they want to essentially give you a ride. But how can they connect to a person who wants to get a ride? That's what Uber is doing that. Get these guys advertise, this guy pay some things, and they have a different model of essentially pricing and how much they will get it. So in that sense, I will say lots of, you may not like this ad that you need to click and get rid of it, but in some sense, if you think about it, these are all advertisement. Even YouTube is advertisement. Again, this is customer to customer. I built something, I want that the other see it. So YouTube is a good framework or marketplace. They get a part of it. Now they get the money part because of advertisement, not just from you.
As well, right?
So sometimes, again, this is the advertisement. So how do you think the whole thing?
Yeah, no, there's actually one thing I wanted to ask you here. So like kind of going back to, like Amazon, like we've seen time and again, like Amazon does not use their retail engine for profits, right? Like retail is simply not a source of profit for Amazon. Like the biggest kind of cash cows for Amazon are their ad business and AWS business. So in some sense, retail is what's enabling Amazon to be able to build either of these kind of businesses. So I think one thing then, like interestingly, is like you mentioned, okay, Amazon is usually considered the place you can go to buy things like the cheapest. And so their strategy is like, everyday low price for the most part. They're experimenting with a little bit of other pricing strategies, but that's the core of who they are. Versus like companies like Overstock and, Bed Bath & Beyond and Wayfair, like they're more high-low, right? Like, at some point you're going to get a really good deal on a particular thing. So you kind of wait for that deal to show up to buy. But the point I wanted to make here is like with Amazon, like, any of these strategies you take on, ultimately your business needs to be sustainable. Otherwise, you just don't stick around for long enough, right? And so kind of going back to advertising, like I think, these businesses have to make some money, at the very least operating costs, no matter what. And I think advertising has kind of changed the game in a few different ways to be able to do this, right? And I'm wondering, like, economically, like, does advertising make it more efficient for you to be able to run this business, more efficient for you, your partners, and your customers? Just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Great. So actually, that's a very good question. I can say, I'm doing some systems, so I have some ideas about that. And I have done something over long term. I think I was writing programs like when I was 10, and even at that time there was Microsoft DOS essentially, not Windows. And like writing programs there, it was to Windows. If you want to do it, it was horrible essentially. But why do I say that? Because at that time you will just think about YouTube, and I think I want to answer your question with a good example. Don't just consider YouTube. The people take it for granted. I have some experience essentially, like for these videos and other stuff. And I know also some things about Facebook that I will add to that. Just think about it. The people, how many people per day, they are just uploading their videos online.
Right.
Interestingly, so if you upload something at YouTube, you may upload something very high quality. It can be easily like 1 hour. You can upload it something like 10 gigabytes. Then YouTube is doing, I mean, it takes some time for YouTube to process it. It takes some time to upload it and then some time essentially to process it. And when it does process, then it maybe reduces for 1 hour. I will say something like 500K or something like that.
Okay.
Interestingly, they will still keep that 10 gigabyte things somewhere. So if you want, actually, you can ask Google and they can send that one. It may take a day or something, but they can send it to you. So just think about it. Like just even if it's 500K for 1 hour, 500 megabytes actually for 1 hour, or half a gig for 1 hour. How much space you need, how much traffic you need to essentially satisfy to show all these people are essentially just uploading, these people are viewing it. It is horrible. Like if you know a little bit about system, you see it's like something that it is like a miracle that we can do it. And note that it's not the case that if not somebody does not see your video after 2 years, it disappears. They had such kind of services before. No, everything is there. Right. And still everything is available. Everything is fast. All of this technology, and the same thing also actually you have it at Facebook. Facebook, for example, Instagram, they have it, the lives.
Right.
And they have all, especially I will say Google and maybe Facebook. Google especially was a bit late into cloud. Why they were late into the cloud business compared to Amazon? Because or maybe Microsoft, because they spend a lot of their resources for their the services that they are providing, like YouTube. So in some sense, the whole AWS is there such that it can answer your like YouTube request. The same thing for Facebook. I know also the fact that, I mean, they like anything that they will create in some sense before they want to, I mean, present it like as a cloud or something, they need it themselves because this is very time consuming. And all the money that they will get it is from advertisement. So such a great service was not there if there was no advertisement. So in some sense, it's essential things like if you think about it. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it's like I remember like not just for like e-commerce, internet services, just in general software, right? Like we started, we had this wonderful thing of like open source being the model of kind of how people used to build software. Like I personally remember like, feel very proud when I'm able to open source something, contribute to the community. And this is kind of the standard that kind of led to the evolution of like software and kind of a whole bunch of like stuff we find on the internet. I think to a certain degree, there was like, customers feel like this is a right for them. It's a right to be able to watch YouTube, it's a right to be able to kind of read Wikipedia. At least the newer generation, I'm sure, kind of feels that way. But yeah, there has to be some way to be able to kind of bear the cost of it, right? So without advertising, which is like all these, internet brainchilds, I don't think would be sustainable. And so in that regard, it's a very, very kind of scalable and sustainable way for us to be able to get these wonderful kind of services out there. What is the cost? Ultimately, it's attention, right? But then like kind of going into advertising, like common conception of advertising is like, oh, it's something you don't want. And I think a big reason for this is because because of constraints that it could not be personalized. So you had to kind of stick through, this ad for a car, even though you have no intention for sitting through of buying a car, because that was the thing that these channel providers could do, right? Like you could only broadcast one service to everybody out there. And with like personalization and stuff, like that's rapidly changing, like if we can leverage insights and information to figure out what's most suitable for you. So I think there's in the recent years, there's the lines between what is advertisement and what is organically of value to you these are rapidly blurring, right? And that leads to better advertising and more sustainable and less of this like customer hate towards advertising, I think. Yeah.
And actually, I want to add even more to that. So I think I mentioned the whole thing is like e-commerce, maybe as advertisement. And I will say, even I want to say advertisement is nothing other than mechanical Turk. Mm-hmm. So what is the mechanical Turk concept? So like I think Amazon was pioneering that one, but there are several other companies, maybe they are better now than Amazon mechanical Turk, that you will pay some small amount of money for some task that the people should do it. In some sense, advertisement, so this cost of YouTube that we talk, essentially creating this, the whole, I mean, AWS makes a lot of money. Google probably could do such kind of money by just using the resources at YouTube instead of dedicating to them, just put it essentially for the people to use it. They didn't do that. I mean, they didn't do that, but in some sense, they need to get the money. Where to get the money from? The mechanical Turk. So advertisement is nothing that, I mean, somebody pays, I mean, some money, and the money is not that bad. So from my experience, actually, it can be like for one advertisement, if you click, you need to pay something like around $2. I mean, display ads is not a bad thing. But this dollar money goes there. So some part of it, you will use the free, essentially like YouTube, but instead you need to spend some of your time to see the advertisement. This is exactly the mechanical Turk. You need to do that. Somebody pays for you, and maybe they don't pay you directly. They will pay YouTube such that it provides such a service for you. So in some sense, advertisement, yes, nobody loves it, because in some sense you are doing some work essentially, but it's needed. Otherwise, there was no YouTube, or like, as you mentioned, open sources or lots of other things. They were not there if there were, or like I will say for even at Amazon, you may get better prices because like just think about Amazon business model. There is AWS that makes a lot of money. Right. Also, there's the ads that don't make a lot of money, but the retail is essentially, I mean, not much surplus, maybe because of this Prime, they have something. This is, but there is one other thing that I want to add. So in addition of these ads and pricing, there is one other thing, membership fee. That's another one that actually brings money to the people. And this is the business that lots of people are doing it.
That's the core of like Costco's business model, right?
Exactly. The Costco or Amazon now, or lots of other things. And in some sense, I mean, they will get some money upfront from you. I mean, because of the discount that they will give it on each of these items. So that's also another, maybe the third way of getting the money. So retail, essentially advertisement, some pricing, such that you get benefit, and this kind of membership fee that they will get it, and maybe with that become positive. But if there was no advertisement, and if there is just some kind of, I mean, there is no like much profit of like just retail, then you may need to pay more for the items that you will get it. Right. So in some sense, you are doing this type of mechanical Turk, or this, I would say, economy of scale. So YouTube or Amazon, in some sense, from the work that you are doing, this time that you spend to see this ad, get some money. They don't pay you, but they will pay themselves in some sense, such that they can provide such a service for you for free.
That's quite interesting, right? And kind of thinking of it from like, you know, economic standpoint, like this is probably one of the most efficient, like, you know, like we always say like the market is efficient in the long term, right? This is something that's generally accepted in kind of finance and economics. Kind of think of it as the same kind of principle applies here. The more, you know, the more it satisfies your need, the more, you know, like pleasurable this work is for you, the more inclined you are to do this piece of work. So the more this value gets generated on the platform, and, you know, it's as soon as you find these advertisements like overbearing, or like, you know, you're done with kind of whatever task you wanted to do, then you stop using the service. So in essence, you stop paying the you know, supplier for whatever it is that you're consuming, right? And so I think, like, you know, like this is something I think we should go into like much deeper in one of the later sessions, but this allows us to kind of build a very efficient kind of economy as well. This kind of concept of advertisement.
Yeah, and also I want to add another story also that is also important. I think that again we are talking also about the recent things happens, like we talk about Netflix essentially downturn in terms of stock price. Another I think important things was somehow the war mainly between Facebook and Apple, and this was I don't want to defend any of them. I just try to say essentially like a truth. This is like educational thing. So that was interesting. So that was like I think if you may know that, Apple essentially added more privacy to their system. So now by default, if you don't turn on, that advertiser can essentially track you through cookies, etc., then they don't report any of these things. And that is like a very big thing. When I was at Amazon, that was a very big thing because they will call it cookieless world, essentially. Google was supposed to do it like maybe by now, but they deferred the plan essentially for a while.
Pushing it back, right?
Because it's a very important thing. And that is very important. Like we will again talk more about advertisement, but the whole idea is that the advertiser needs some information from you such that at least they make this labor that they will give to you as a mechanical term, make it more enjoyable. That's I can put it there. Anyhow, you need to do the labor such that somebody should pay for the cost, no free lunch. So in that sense, so they try to make it more enjoyable, somehow more related to you, such that maybe you will get some gain out of it because you may find a good deal and then go and buy it. So they need this information. Apple blocks this information. So by default, it's not going there. If you are, and this is some of the things that I try to open from the both sides, essentially. If you just talk about customer, then you may think, oh, that's a very good thing. They are making everything, private, nothing leaking, and I hate this advertisement. But that was actually some kind of deal. These are actually the one that Facebook also mentioned. This is some game that Apple was playing here. Why? Of course, who hurts here? Facebook. Again, Facebook went quite a bit down exactly because of this thing. At the beginning, they didn't think that it would be the big things, but nowadays, I think that one of the big threat to them, at least, they may find some technologies that they can get approximation of that, but at the short term, at least, this was the thing that, again, Facebook price came from almost 383 now to, I think, 160. Now maybe it's a downturn, but it became essentially half exactly because of this thing. Because they didn't have the access to see the information that people at Facebook had. The people that, the customers, for example, that they are using iPhone or other things, such that they can give them essentially the best advertisement. And advertisement, generally, the people are charging it per click. Now, if you don't know what are your customers, and the people don't pay you if you don't, essentially, the people, generally, there are some models that just display ad that they will pay you, but the bulk of the money actually comes from clicking. And if this guy that you are sending, you're blind in some sense, you don't know who are this guy because Apple does not share this for you.
Right.
So you will just send something for this guy. This guy does not click. You need to send another one. And note that unless this guy does not click, you don't get any money.
Right.
So in some sense, you may send 5 more ads. It means that 5 slots that are, still they can send ads, but there are 5 slots that have been essentially ruined to get 1 click, versus before they had more information, they know me, and they could send maybe 2 and then they get 1 click out.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So essentially, by asking for privacy, the side effect you get is more and less relevant ads for you, right? So somebody has to pay. Ultimately, you as the customer is most likely paying for it if there's no other explicit kind of monetization. So something that thought was a very good idea may translate to a subpar experience for the customers.
Exactly. And I think that was exactly the thing that you mentioned. So this one I mentioned from the Facebook side, why they had a loss. And because they don't know this guy, they need to have more technology to understand who am I, maybe approximately. Of course, if you know, the cookies generally are some information that will be saved on your computer by different programs. You know that how I have seen, what are the websites that I have seen, and so on and so forth. So you could get information, and essentially, these are some of the predictions. We will talk more about this type of thing. These are very important. How you can, this is the probability of click, is one of the most important things in the whole advertisement business. they have like a Google, Amazon, they have a big groups that they just understand probability of click. And the best models of machine learning has been used to understand this aspect. What did you want to say?
Really quickly on the definition of this, right? Like probability of click is like how likely am I as a customer to click this item if you show it to me? So like just a very like general definition, like if your probability of click is higher than mine, if you're more likely to click on something than I am, and if the platform has a choice to show it to you or me, the obvious answer there should be show it to you, because everybody wins, right? You get something that you're more likely to click on for your reasons. And then based on that, like you get to kind of charge the cost per click for supplier, and they're more likely to sell their product because this happens, right? So just, kind of like clarifying the definition for the audience.
Yeah, great. And this is actually one of the things that I can confess. Like I was working essentially, I had like papers in this economic, like ACM e-commerce then becomes economics and computation. This is one of the most interesting one essentially in this business of e-commerce. ACM EC conference, lots of nice papers. I had some papers early on, like I don't know, 20 years ago almost there. But this probability of, I was reading the papers, but I didn't quite get this probability of click. When I joined, I think at Google and more at Amazon, that's the time that say how important is that. There were papers actually on that things like from published essentially by Google or Microsoft or Yahoo people essentially. But I understood actually the importance of that actually much more than like the one that I knew, for example, in just academia, that why this particular thing is so important. So anyhow, so that's the thing that we talk about it. And I just want to finish this story with Apple that now, what did happen? So this is the case that now you don't see the ads. Now Facebook cannot send you the apps. But these apps that you had it at iOS, essentially, you could get the these apps, they could get the money because of this advertisement. And now if Facebook cannot or Google, they cannot send the best ad there, they don't send it. So these guys, they have spent a lot of money to create the ads. They need some kind of cloud computing, etc. Somebody should pay for that. What do? They need to essentially, these apps will be not free. They will come to the membership fee idea that you need to pay essentially per month, or at least you need to buy that.
Right.
So they need to get their money. So then what will happen? That was the interesting thing. Now, if you want to buy or these things, Apple had all these things on their essential server. For any money that the app gets, some percentage Apple gets.
Goes to the Apple.
That's essentially just shifting the game. It's not really the customer. You can sell it, but at the end, the customer now need to pay for all of these apps that they were free before. Right. And who gets the money? Apple gets the money, because now anyone who pays anything through Apple services, Apple gets a cut of that. That was the big thing that actually Facebook and Apple, they had fight over that. And this is actually a real thing. So if you think about this way, I always say that, whenever now I'm working on game theory, like it is important to see the whole world as a game. It's a completely different lens than the seeing that everything. So you may feel that, we care about the customer and customer privacy, but at the end, it turns out that they get more money. Okay. Yeah. And that's something that I think the people should be more careful. I don't want to defend any of this. These are the companies, and their business is to make money for themselves. That's the definition of a company. And if they don't make it, they will become bankrupted. But I think the people should be very careful when they are looking into these ideas and doing, decide that which one is the move, and just don't be fooled by something that the company says, because they are doing for their
and that's marketing onto itself, right? Like no matter what, it's like these companies are taking particular stances and approaching their business a particular way. And then for Apple, like this business case just happens to align very well with at least what customers say they want, which is more privacy. I think what'll be interesting to see is like, at what cost are you willing to have privacy? Are you willing to pay the $10 per month subscription for privacy reasons? And, I think so. We're just kind of starting out like GDPR and like a bunch of these like privacy oriented rules are coming into place now. I think it'll be interesting to see where this goes and kind of how this shifts kind of the landscape. more broadly?
I will see actually man has appeared on the screen as well.
Oh yeah.
I think we had
Hi guys,
this one
sorry.
no, I think that was actually a reminder. So we had this one for 1 hour. I think we can go a little bit more, but I want to give some, essentially conclusions so far, the thing that we have done. So we talk about e-commerce in general, and then retail in particular, different type of essentially way that you can get money. Because if you want to run a business, you need to get money. And one is the advertisement, one is pricing, and the other one is this kind of membership. And as we mentioned, even pricing in some sense, lots of the time, even you can consider that one as advertisement. So these are somehow interchangeable. And this is some money that you can get from one way or another way, essentially. Now, so and each of them are very deep. So we will go through the details of these guys, these concepts. In the future sessions of these things, like for example, pricing. You may want to talk about pricing. There are whole things about the discount, even not just discount. This is this concept of, for example, a loss leader. This actually, we had some papers on that, that you may go bring some items below the cost. You may have some kind of a loss on that, such that you can bring profit from the other one. But you need to make sure that if you are not careful and you are doing that, if you are a small business and you want to do that, if you are not careful, you may become bankrupted, and you may at least lose a good chunk of money before you understand it. These are the areas that actually you need to have very, nice software that can help you to understand this concept of things. Or like about advertisement, these are tons of advertisement. There are display ads. These are the, for example, a sponsored ad. These are the things that you will see that Amazon, or there are like the video ads. This is called a sponsored product. These are like different things that you can have it, and we can discuss more of this. And these are, and even as I mentioned, just the probability of click is one of the most complicated things probably in this business. And getting this very precise is very, very, very important, super important, because that ties exactly to the money that the people will make. So these are the things that and of course, also the membership fee. So if we want to do the membership fee, what would be the things essentially to consider how much you should do that, because at the end you are making some money if you put it too high. Not too many people are coming and if you don't put it too low, then you need to get it advertisement. This is actually the Netflix
loyalty, right? Like it ties directly into loyalty as well, and retention. So like, what is the likelihood your customer returning if you provide this kind of like monthly paid or like recurring source, and they get certain benefits, versus if you were to discount prices, or you were to send out coupons for customers, or you spend that money on kind of like external marketing channels. And like how you solve for this is also not obvious, right? It's like, and you have to evaluate these really carefully, because the numbers may look very small in terms of like your lift or changes in recurring retention. And that can have huge implications in how your business runs over the long term and sustains.
Yes. And so these are like a very, important thing that like for any business. And again, this is not the business of the past. This is a current business. Like you just think about Netflix. They had the membership fee ideas. Now they are changing it so that they need to get some money from ads as well. So, and of course, also the pricing. I think they had this one that some items you need to pay for them to get it. Like, for example, if you consider Amazon Prime for the video, they had this kind of the combination. So, and the question is that if we go to ads, how much should be the membership fee? How much we can get it from ads? How much ads we should show? These are like very important problems. And again, I think you can do a lot of research. And especially if you are a small business, one thing that happens often is that you may not have resources, because you really need, one of the things that Amazon, was very successful in that sense, that goes from like less than 10 billion to like 31, 32 billion. These are public knowledge, that in 3 years, that's because they had actually lots of scientists and lots of researchers that they can think about it. And this is a huge money that you need to pay, because the research, by definition, you don't know whether you will reach the answer or not. That's a really
good point. This is like a business moat by itself, right? By like, having the ability, the affordance to hire scientists to focus on these problems, you're kind of ensuring that your business is going to kind of sustain and grow, versus like newcomers and smaller businesses. they don't even have the skill set and talent to be able to tackle these problems. So it becomes extremely difficult for them to run their business in a more optimized way.
Exactly. And I think that's the whole idea of, that's like this business, this is a growing business. It's a lot of money. I think I don't have the exact number. Maybe we can mention it next time, how much there is just the retail in the US or the whole world, essentially. As you know, it is such a big thing that a little bit, maybe not a bit more than a little bit, disruption in supply chain can cause so much inflation, essentially. So it's a huge money is going there. And if you are not careful, any of these things you may make suboptimal money, or even you may essentially have a loss. So that's important to have, companies, or that they can, and the talent, or like the people who work in this area for a long time and spend time. And this is, unfortunately, is not something that every company can create for themselves. Some big companies like Google or Amazon or something, they can do it, but generally they will use it more for themselves. That's the idea, because they create it, and also because of the competition, others cannot use it. Like you can, lots of these other, like for example, Overstock cannot use Amazon things because they are competing with each other, or with Wayfair. So in some sense, you need to spend money to create these things, and that's a very, a lot of money you need to spend. So that's the thing that companies that they can do this for the smaller business, that would be like a great thing, or even not a smaller business, something that they can dedicate the things, and these are not necessarily working for one company that prevents them to work with another company. So these are some of the things that we discussed about the pricing. I think there's a lot of things that we will talk more about, like the different business that these companies they have, like Amazon, Overstock, Wayfair, Etsy, Shopify. We will talk about this one. For each of them, we can spend quite a bit of time. We talk about COVID stuff, what is the effect of COVID, essentially the whole things. Again, we go we have a deep dive on that, and we go a bit more, not just the surface, we go through like a bit deeper on that, and lots of other things, essentially, that you may want to consider, like even some of these and other things that may come when you want to run these things, somehow related again to e-commerce in general, that there is some service that you may want to buy, or some service that you may want to rent, like pay, which one you should choose. Or these are actually, again, lots of things that come, some of the discussion that we had it with Nishan, especially like at Overstock or other places, should we hire this company or we should build that one ourselves? And these are very nice things that we will discuss more in the future sessions. So I think we try to keep it on time. This is a live, so we may go a little bit more than that. Yeah, Manis, I think you are there. So
yeah, thank you so much. It has been an interesting conversation. Obviously, this is our pilot, and we are planning on doing this every month, a third Monday of every month. And each month we will do a deep dive on one of the topics discussed today. Obviously, we discussed a lot about pricing, personalization, data privacy, and systems. So many things. It's very informative. And we do have a question from someone who asks us, what's your advice on pricing for digital products in early stages startup? So if you want to take like 4 to 5 minutes to answer that, because we need to be mindful of time.
Yeah. So Nishan, you may go first.
Yeah. This is an interesting question, right? I think it's without kind of diving into a lot of the details, the answer probably won't do justice. But I would say, like, it's important to approach this from one, your business strategy. Like, what are you looking to do? Like, with you being like, is this the end game? Do you expect this thing to be your like massive driver of revenue? Is this a stepping stone into something else for your business, right? Like we talked about loss leaders, for example. So one, you need to have clarity in terms of where this fits into your like offering structure, and then approach it accordingly. The second is, again, this is where these probabilities and estimates become really important. I think where you want to go is like, given different price structures, what kind of volume would you get, right? Like how many customers would buy it, given some estimate of this, given an estimate, then you can kind of backtrack into what is a reasonable price. And this is actually very, very difficult problem, and price elasticity, right? Like we talk about like a lot of pricing theory, is oriented towards like, it just assume you have a price utility curve and then figure like where in the curve you want to sit. But in practice, it's very difficult to draw this curve, because unless you price something at a particular price, like you don't know what the customers would be like willing to pay for it. So in that regard, like my general advice is like, start with a higher price, because the price of your item, it's very rare that the price of particularly digital goods like go up over time. They almost always go down over time. And so factor in this kind of stable price as well, and hopefully build in the ability to experiment with it as you roll it out.
Yeah, great. Actually, I want to just add, I think Nishan mentioned overall things, but I can actually add something to that. These problems are complicated. I don't know. I mean, like maybe I have published, I mean, like maybe around 200-300 papers essentially. Still, I mean, like these companies that I was hired by them, these are the problems that I have been given to solve, and these are complicated. And these are like, I'm working on theories, not just experimental things. And the theory, I mean, you need to think much more. And still, these are complicated problems for me to think about it, because there are lots of parameters. And also, you need to deep dive. Is like sometimes this is important that you need to go find the exact, like the best solution for this one. And if you are not careful, I mean, this is the interesting thing. You don't know how much you lose. That's the important thing. Unless you can prove that it is optimal, you don't know how much you lose essentially, comparing to the other ways that you can do it. So these are complicated problems. And like some of like my students, for example, they are like, lots of them, they are in industry, top businesses. They are just doing that because you need to have like, I think PhD, maybe like work on that. And still, if you have even lots of papers, these are not easy problems to solve. And I think these are the things that Nishan mentioned. These are some general ideas it mentioned. And we will be happy actually to help if there are some people. I mean, you can just contact me, Nishan, or of course, Manas, that they can contact us. I mean, you have, or like me, I'm at LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. I think you can find me, just search my name and you will find in each of these things. And like my email is my last name at gmail.com. I think Nishan and Manas also. Manas, what was your the best email address for you?
So manas@setna.ai would be the best email to reach out to me.
Yeah, so we have it here essentially written.
Yeah,
Manas
that's on my background.
at setna.ai. And Nishan, is there any particular email that you want to give? Or you can
first name, last name at Gmail, right? Nishan Subedi at Gmail.
Yeah. So we will be glad actually to hear about these things. And these are like the whole idea. I think we see that these are the potential, and it would be interesting problems. I love essentially to solve these problems, but you know, these are like never-ending problems. And I will say this in some sense, you can think about that you will go to a doctor. Actually, nowadays, the doctors, they are using lots of MLS stuff and others, and you can find a lot of these things on the web. Unfortunately, this type of optimizations or this way of thinking of pricing, you cannot find them on the web. At least, I mean, maybe you find some papers, but these are not the one that these are implemented. These are much more deep depths into that, and these are generally obtained by top tech companies. Not all of them are available on the web because these are some kinds of, I mean, private information. And so these are like not an easy things, I can tell you. And but yeah, you can get some ideas, but getting the correct thing is a hard thing. And still, these companies, they are hiring scientists. They pay a lot of them. Why? Because they can get solution for these ones. The solution that it is very important, because
with high impact for your business.
Yeah, 1% improvement. Like just think about multiply by the money that Amazon gets from the retail. I mean, that would be huge essentially.
Right.
Like 120 billion, I think 110 billion per quarter. And then 1% of that, you see how big is that? How many scientists they can afford it? Not everyone can afford that thing. Yeah, so these are the things. It would be great if you contact us, I mean, for these things. And of course, you can read on the things. We try to give some ideas for you. But I think this is something that if you want to do it for your own business, needs more, I mean, expertise and more ideas about this, the people who have built these things in the past. Great. So anything else that we want to discuss? Any other
I think that was a great introduction session. And obviously, we will do a deep dive in coming months on different items that we talked about today. And, for all the, listeners or audience who's watching this live webinar, please reach out to us if you'd like us to do a deep dive on any topic, or if you'd like to contact Dr. Mohammad or Nishan in regards to any topics that they discussed today. So, I mean, I think that's with that, we should wrap. And since we're a little bit over time, just want to be mindful of everyone's time. So any last words, Dr. Muhammad or
Yeah,
Nishan?
I want to mention, I mean, we put this type of things in terms of YouTube and I mean, live thing. I think this is a bit less formal, that it allows us that we go dive deep if needed rather than slides. And the good thing is that we will put all of this also on a podcast. You can get it from the Google or iTunes or Castbox. You can get all of them. So you can listen to them anytime, no slides or things. We try to give the ideas. It's a bit harder, but we try to, I mean, I think we became better because of this COVID time, that the people cannot talk or draw the same thing. It might be harder, so they need to talk. We try to mention the ideas by talking, such that you can listen at any time and hopefully, I mean, enjoy that. It may be something that you can use it for your own business. I think the great, like very important, as I mentioned, anything on the internet in some sense is now e-commerce. So hopefully some of these ideas, you might use it for your own business or your research on anywhere else.
Perfect. Nishan, any last words?
Yeah, thanks for setting this up. Like, I had a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to the deep dives, and I'm hoping we can bring in like additional experts from the field as well, as like we dive into the topics. So on that note, yeah, like reach out about like topics you want to go into details of, and we can probably find somebody that's an expert in those specific areas as well. So thanks again.
And sorry, yeah, if there is some particular topic that you like, please let us know. Or if some particular person, I think we will be happy to talk with them as well. I mean, it would be good to also mention to that person that they talk to us, because sometimes, getting familiar, it might take some time. So if you mention that, we will be happy actually to have experts in the area and talk about it, and we will do that. And hopefully that would be some kind of useful educational life for the people, and something that you can also use it for your business or your research.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad. Thank you, Nishan. And it's been a pleasure listening to you, both of your expertise and wisdom. And hopefully our audience had got some chance to, get some knowledge and, maybe apply that in their business.
Thanks, both of you. And I mean, joining this, and we will continue. I think that was a great thing. Yeah.
This is a lot of fun. So we'll do more.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All audience. Bye.
All right. Take care. Bye.